Yes, read we will. And today, of course, we're reading the collected works of Stalin, Volume 1. We are all the way down on page 247. I thought Jimmy Kimmel passed away or whatever. We have we're on page 247 on the PDF, or page 226 if you're on the physical copy. Which is, of course, factory legislation. Oh, I thought he died and they went to his tomb and like the boulder had moved, you know? I thought it was something like that. My mistake. I must be thinking of someone else. All right, Stalin. Factory legislation and the proletarian struggle. Concerning the two laws of November 15th. This is very short, but it's good. There was a time when our labor movement was in its initial stages. At that time, the proletariat was split up into separate groups and did not think of waging a common struggle. Railway workers, miners, factory workers, artisans, shop assistants, and clerks. Such were the groups into which the Russian proletariat was divided. Moreover, the workers in each group, in their turn, were split up according to the towns, big or small, they lived and worked in, with no link, either party or trade union, between them. Thus, there was no sign of the proletariat as a united and indivisible class. Consequently, there was no sign of the proletarian struggle as a general class offensive. That is why the Tsarist government was able calmly to pursue its traditional policy. That is why, when the Workers' Insurance Bill was introduced in the State Council in 1893, Pobdonosdev, the inspirer of the reaction, jeered at the sponsors and said with aplomb, quote, "Gentlemen, you have taken all this trouble for nothing. I assure you that there is no labor problem in our country." Unquote. But time passed, the economic crisis drew near, strikes became more frequent, and the disunited proletariat gradually organized itself in a united class. The strikes of 1903 already showed that there is a labor problem in our country, and that it had existed for a long time. The strikes in January and February 1905 proclaimed to the world for the first time that the proletariat, as a united class, was growing and becoming mature in Russia. Then, the general strikes in October December 1905 and the ordinary strikes in June and July 1906 actually drew together the proletarians in the different towns, actually welded together the shop assistants, clerks, artisans, and industrial workers in a united class, and thereby loudly proclaimed to the world that the forces of the once disunited proletariat had now taken the path of union and were organizing themselves in a united class. The effect of the general political strike as a method of waging the common proletarian struggle against the present system also made itself felt. Now it was no longer possible to deny the existence of the labor problem. Now the Tsarist government was already obliged to reckon with the movement. And so the reactionaries gathered in their offices and began to set up different commissions and draft factory laws. The Shilvotsky Commission, the Kokotsky Commission, the Associations Act, see Manifesto of October 17, the Witt-Donovo circulars, various projects and plans. And now we're going to look at what each of these projects and plans is. So, the commission headed by Senator Szydlowski was set up by the Tsar's Juche of January 29th, 1905. Ostensibly, quote, for the purpose of urgently investigating the causes of discontent among the workers of the city of St. Petersburg and its suburbs. It was intended to include in the commission delegates elected by the workers. The Bolsheviks regarded this as an attempt on the part of the Tsar's government to divert the workers from the revolutionary struggle, and therefore proposed that advantage be taken of the election of delegates to this commission to present political demands to the government. After the government rejected these demands, the worker electors refused to elect their representatives to the commission and called upon the workers of the St. Petersburg to come out on strike. Mass political strikes broke out the very next day. On February 20th, 1905, the Tsar's government was obliged to dissolve the Szydlowski Commission. Szydlowski Commission, it should be called. And number 2, the function of the commission headed by V.N. Kokovsky, the Minister of Finance, all right? The Minister of Finance Commission, V.N., set up in February 1905, was like that of Szydlowski Commission, to investigate the labor problem, but without the participation of workers' representatives. The commission remained in existence until the summer of 1905. Number 3, the Associations Act of March 4th, 1906, granted the right of legal existence to societies and unions, provided they registered their rules with the government. Notwithstanding the numerous restrictions imposed upon the activities of various associations, and the fact that they were held criminally liable for infringements of the law, the workers made extensive use of the rights granted them in order to form proletarian industrial organizations. In the period of 1905-07, mass trade unions were formed in Russia for the first time, and these waged an economic and political struggle under the leadership of revolutionary social democracy. And 4, after the promulgation of the Tsar's Manifesto of October 17, 1905, S.J. Witt, the president of the Council of Ministers, and P.N. Durnovov, the Minister of the Interior, notwithstanding the official proclamation of freedom, issued a series of circulars and telegrams to provincial governors and city governors, calling upon them to disperse meetings and assemblies by armed force, to suppress newspapers, to take stringent measures against trade unions, and summarily exile all persons suspected of conducting revolutionary activities, etc. So, those are the various policies that he lists here, so I'm going to go back now. And so, the reactionaries gathered in their offices and began to set up different commissions and to draft factory laws. The Szydlowski Commission, the Kokovsky Commission, the Associations Act, and the Witt-Durnovos circulars. Various projects and plans. And lastly, the 2 laws of November 15th applying to artisans and commercial employees. So long as the movement was weak, so long as it lacked a mass character, the reaction employed only one method against the proletariat: imprisonment, Siberia, the whip, and the gallows. Always and everywhere, the reaction pursues one object: to split the proletariat into small groups, to smash its vanguard, to intimidate and win over to its side the neutral masses, and thus create confusion in the proletarian camp. We have seen that it achieved this object famously with the aid of whips and prisons. But things took an entirely different turn when the movement assumed a mass character. Now the reaction had no longer to deal only with ringleaders. It was faced by countless masses in all their revolutionary grandeur, and it had to reckon precisely with these masses. But it is impossible to hang the masses. You cannot banish them to Siberia. There are not enough prisons to hold them. As for lashing them with whips, that is not always to the advantage of the reaction, now that the ground under its feet has long been shaken. Clearly, in addition to the old methods, a new, more cultured method had to be employed, which, in the opinion of the reaction, might aggravate the disagreements in the camp of the proletariat, rouse false hopes among the backward section of the workers, induce them to abandon the struggle and rally around the government. Factory legislation is precisely this new method. Thus, while still adhering to the old methods, the Tsar's government wants at the same time to utilize factory legislation, quote unquote, and consequently to solve the burning labor problem by means of both the whip and the law. By means of promises of a shorter working day, the protection of child and female labor, improvement in sanitary conditions, workers' insurance, abolitions of fines, and other benefits of a similar kind. It seeks to win the confidence of the backward section of the workers and thereby dig the grave of proletarian class unity. Seems like Stalin would have rejected Zoran, just saying. The Tsarist government knows very well that it was never so necessary for it to engage in such activity as it is now. At this moment, when the October general strike has united the proletarians in the different industries and has struck at the roots of reaction, when a future general strike may grow into an armed struggle and overthrow the old system, and when, consequently, the reaction must, for its very life, provoke confusion in the labor camp, win the confidence of the backward workers, and win them over to its side. In this connection, it is extremely interesting to note that, with its laws of November 15th, the reaction graciously turned its gaze only upon shop assistants and artisans, whereas it sends the best sons of the industrial proletariat to prison and to the gallows. But this is not surprising when you come to think of it. Firstly, shop assistants, artisans, and employees in commercial establishments are not concentrated in big factories and mills, as the industrial workers are. They are scattered among small enterprises. They are relatively less class conscious, and, consequently, can be more easily deceived than the others. Secondly, shop assistants, office clerks, and artisans constitute a large section of the proletariat of present-day Russia, and consequently, their desertion of the militant proletarians would appreciably weaken the forces of the proletariat, both in the present elections and in the forthcoming action. Lastly, it is common knowledge that the urban petty bourgeoisie is of great importance in the present revolution. That social democracy must revolutionize it under the hegemony of the proletariat. I'm going to say that again. This is one point that a lot of people still they nod their head and act like they hear me saying it, but they don't understand it. That social democracy must revolutionize. Here now, that means that communists must revolutionize it under the hegemony of the proletariat. That's the urban petty bourgeoisie. It ain't easy, but you gotta do it. Now, does that mean you can succeed with every single one of them? Absolutely not. But the petty bourgeoisie, the artisans, etc., you do have to do your best to revolutionize as many as possible. Because it's impossible for us to simply expropriate all of that in one fell swoop. That's impossible. And all it ends up doing is throwing the entire petty bourgeoisie into the camp of the reaction, no matter what. And that's a mistake. Remember, I always talk about what matters is what matters is is their social consciousness. So just because someone is a small business owner under capitalism doesn't mean that they can't get revolutionary education. And you have to understand this. And you also have to understand that in many colonized communities, that people are forced out of the type of work that many white people have. So they're instead open businesses and jump through many hoops and work super hard and have their family work their business, and and they have a store or whatever else. Again, all of this, those people are all considered petty bourgeoisie. And you can't just, like I said, you're gonna go around and you're gonna forcibly expropriate every Asian supermarket? You know what I'm saying? It's not gonna work. And all you're doing by doing this, if your Communist Party program is every small business is going to be forcibly expropriated, you've just thrown a large number of what are potentially allies in that revolutionary struggle against you. Right? Again, we know small business. We're against small business as a system, as a whole. However, that is something that has to be dealt with over time. What needs immediate dealing with is the large bourgeoisie, the industrialists, the imperialists, the ones who own all the heavy industry. That's the thing. I've been petit bourgeois before and will probably be forced to do it again. Yeah, and this is what I'm saying. It's like, it's not as clear cut and dry as anarchists sometimes make it out to be. Where it's just like, well, we hate small business too. Yes, we do hate small business because it exists as it has to do under capitalism. Workers' co-ops are slightly better, but they too have to exist under capitalism and then therefore also participate in the imperialist system as well. Right? So even that is not perfect. What we need is socialist revolution. And you have to build that by gaining the support of the masses. Which is, again, you want to win over as many of them as possible. It's why I appreciate Juche, which hammers that what makes someone part of the proletarian struggle, what makes someone part of the revolutionary struggle, is not purely what class origin they come from, whether they're petty bourgeoisie or proletarian. Because what matters is what ideology they have. You can have a lumpen proletarian person who has a more solid proletarian revolutionary ideology than a proletarian who has worked in factories their whole lives, and maybe they have the most fucking bourgeois, the most bourgeois reactionary fucking Nazi ideology you've ever seen. Like, the proof is all around you. We have to judge people based on their ideology, not their class origin alone. And how do you test their ideology? Their practice, their actions. You gotta weigh their actions with their deeds, and it's not easy. So yeah. And especially with gig work, it gets real complicated, right? So, as Stalin says, that it is common knowledge that the urban petty bourgeoisie is of great importance in the present revolution. That social democracy must revolutionize it under the hegemony of the proletariat, and that nobody can win over the petty bourgeoisie so well as the artisans, shop assistants, and office clerks, who stand closer to it than the rest of the proletarians. Clearly, if the shop assistants and artisans desert the proletariat, the petty bourgeoisie will turn away from it too, and the proletariat will be doomed to isolation in the towns, which is exactly what the Tsarist government wants. And that's why, one reason why I point that out too, Dave. Like, the UK right now is fuck, Dave says in chat. Working class reactionaries, so many of them. And that's the thing, right? That's the reason I point that out is because literally what would traditionally be considered lumpen proletariat and petty bourgeoisie, depending on if they're coming from like you know immigrant communities that have only been here for a certain amount of time, or they're coming from colonized communities or whatever other targeted exploited communities, whether they're petty bourgeoisie or lumpen proletariat or proletariat, they tend, because of that experience as an exploited, as a oppressed person, they tend to have a more revolutionary outlook, regardless of that class origin itself. And of course, many white people more readily adopt white supremacist ideology, right? That's who it's designed to appeal to. And so what you end up with is large, enormous sections of working class people in the imperial core that reject proletarian ideology and fight ardently as reserve army of the bourgeoisie. And that's why we call them labor aristocrats, right? It's not about, they don't have to be fucking rich. That's the thing. They don't have to be rich to be labor aristocrats. All they have to do is fulfill the function of a labor aristocrat. So that's my take anyway. Stalin continues. In the light of these facts, the reason why the reaction concocted the laws of November 15th, which affect only artisans, shop assistants, and office clerks, becomes self-evident. The industrial proletariat will not trust the government, whatever it may do. So factory legislation would be wasted on it. Maybe only bullets can bring the proletariat to its senses. What laws cannot do, bullets must do. That is what the Tsar's government thinks. And that is the opinion not only of our government, but also of every other anti-proletarian government, irrespective of whether it is feudal autocratic, bourgeois monarchist, or bourgeois republican. The fight against the proletariat is waged by means of bullets and laws everywhere. And that will go on until the socialist revolution breaks out, until socialism is established. Recall the years 1824 and 1825 in constitutional England, when the law granting freedom to strike was being drafted, while at the same time the prisons were crammed with workers on strike. Recall Republican France in the 40s of last century, when there was talk about factory legislation, while at the same time the streets of Paris ran with workers' blood. Recall all these and numerous other cases of the same kind, and you will see that it is precisely as we have said. That, however, does not mean that the proletariat cannot utilize such laws. True, in passing factory laws, the reaction has its own plans in view. It wants to curb the proletariat. But step by step, life is frustrating the reaction's plans. And under such circumstances, clauses beneficial to the proletariat always creep into the laws. This happens because no factory law comes into being without a reason, without a struggle. The government does not pass a single factory law until the workers come out to fight, until the government is compelled to satisfy the workers' demand. History shows that every factory law is preceded by a partial or general strike. The law of June 1882, concerning the employment of children, the length of the working day for them, and the institution of factory inspection, was preceded by strikes in Narva, Perm, St. Petersburg, Zaradov in that same year. The laws of June, October 1886 on fines, paybooks, etc. were the direct result of the strikes in the central area in 1885-86. The law of June 1897, shortening the working day, was preceded by the strikes in St. Petersburg in 1895-96. The laws of 1903 concerning employers' liability and shop stewards were the direct result of the strikes in the South. In that same year, lastly, the laws of November 15, 1906, on a shorter working day and Sunday rest for shop assistants, office clerks, and artisans are the direct results of the strikes that took place all over Russia in June and July this year. As you see, every factory law was preceded by a movement of the masses who, in one way or another, achieved the satisfaction of their demands, if not in full, then at least in part. It is self-evident, therefore, that however bad a factory law may be, it nevertheless contains several clauses which the proletariat can utilize for the purpose of intensifying its struggle. Needless to say, we must grasp such clauses and use them as instruments with which to still further to strengthen its organization and to stir up more fiercely the proletarian struggle. The struggle for the socialist revolution. Babel was right when he said, quote, "The devil's head must be cut off with his own sword." Unquote. In this respect, both laws of November 15th are extremely interesting. Of course, they contain numerous bad clauses, but they also contain clauses which the reaction introduced unconsciously, but which the proletariat must utilize consciously. Thus, for example, although both laws are called laws for protection of labor, they contain atrocious clauses which completely nullify all protection of labor, and which here and there even the employers will shrink from utilizing. Both laws establish a 12-hour day in commercial establishments and artisans' workshops, in spite of the fact that in many places the 12-hour day has already been abolished, and a 10 or an 8-hour day has been introduced. Both laws permit 2 hours overtime per day, making a 14-hour day, over a period of 40 days in commercial establishments, and 60 days in workshops, in spite of the fact that nearly everywhere all overtime has been abolished. At the same time, the employers are granted the right, by agreement with the workers, i.e. by coercing the workers to increase overtime and lengthen the working day to 17 hours, etc., etc. The proletariat will not, of course, surrender to the employers a single shred of the rights they have already won. And the fables in the above-mentioned laws will remain the ridiculous fables they really are. On the other hand, the laws contain clauses which the proletariat can make good use of to strengthen its position. Both laws say that where the working day is not less than 8 hours, the workers must be given a 2 hours break for dinner. It is well known that at present, artisans, shop assistants, and office clerks do not everywhere enjoy a 2-hour break. Both laws also say that persons under 17 have the right, in addition to these 2 hours, to absent themselves from the shop or workshop for another 3 hours a day to attend school, which of course will be a great relief for our young comrades. There can be no doubt that the proletariat will make fitting use of such clauses in the laws of November 15th, will duly intensify its proletarian struggle, and show the world once again that the devil's head must be cut off with his own sword. Akalia Drovba, New Times, number 4, December 4th, 1906, signed Co. Translated from Georgian.